Hello and welcome to another lighting diagram cinematography video. My name is Trenton Hoshiko, and we're going to be making a lighting diagram for Johnathan Singer Sargent's Mrs. Charles Gifford Dyer, also known as Mary Anthony. This is a pretty exquisite portrait, and one thing I love about Singer Sargent is his ability to capture these portraits that have such intimacy to them. And I think that is partly due to the lighting. Now, one thing about recreating a painting like this in terms of a diagram and talking about that is we are talking about how the light looks, but what we miss out on from the difference to painting is the actual brush work that captures the spirit of the person in the artwork. We don't get that, but in photography and filmmaking, we have the opportunity to do the same kind of thing through lens diffusion, lens choice, all of those kinds of things, and then in post, color correction. So we do have similar tools, but they have a different starting place. So let's get Draw.io open right here. If you want to follow along with your own image, you can use the free lighting diagram template that I have over on my Patreon. The link to that page in particular is linked in the video's description down below. So as always, create a new diagram, blank diagram, and then we're going to save as. And now we're going to import our template. So we're going to say File, Import, and then we're going to navigate to where that template is on our desktop in my case. And then now let's bring our painting in. To do that, we're going to just drag it and drop it because I think that's kind of easy, and resize it. Okay, so as always, we're going to just take a moment to actually look at the painting and notice some things about the lighting. So this back wall right here is a really even flat tone. It looks like she's sitting on a settee, maybe that you have a bed. Now, that wall behind her is very even. So we're going to want something that is able to create a nice, even, flat light right behind her. Now, all the shaping of this image pretty much is happening in her face. It's very, very important to capture the shaping in her face in this case. We do get a little bit down here on the bed and with the flowers. We get a little bit on her hand, but really primarily where we're seeing the actual effects of the light are her face. I mean, really, we only have a brown tone, a pink tone, a black tone, a tan tone. I mean, and then we get her face and her skin actually has tone variance and looks, normal, although pale. I think that it's interesting to see the very limited color palette that is being used here. And that's something that can be thought of through production design. How do we use the color palette of the environment itself? One of the best ways to make any short film, student film, indie film, and big budget film look like a movie is to actually have production design. If you don't have production design, you're not fully building the world. The lighting that you're doing is to sculpt the world that you have built physically so that it is captured within the spirit of the story itself. But if you're just in a white, blank, office-looking room, no matter how much lighting you do, you won't necessarily reach your goals because the rest of the world isn't being built. So always discuss production design and color tones as part of how your cinematography is going to function with the film itself. So let's zoom in here and kind of notice some things about her face in particular. We have a really nice light that is coming kind of top down. And we can tell that in particular because of the chin shadow right here. So we are going to be lighting from the top down. So the angle of the shadow says that the light is relatively straight onto her. It might be coming slightly from an angle because we do get a little bit of shaping on both sides of the face where her cheekbones kind of go up towards her ears. But by and large, it's relatively straight on, which, in terms of what we talk about for photography and filmmaking usually, is don't light necessarily straight on. And I think that that's a unique style aspect here that we're going to be trying to replicate and be inspired by to create a specific type of shape. It's not necessarily the best look for every shot. And if you tried to film every shot from every movie that you make with the subject being lit straight on, it probably would look a little strange and inconsistent shot to shot. But if you want something that has a really distinct style and a really distinct punctuation to a moment, something like this could be very useful. And in general, learning about how different artists capture different types of portraits will help you build your eye and your tool set for capturing your own portraits. And even if that is a portrait within a film. I will note that the shadows under where her eyebrows are not incredibly intense, at least not as intense as her chin shadow. So I think that light is a little bit further away from her, maybe more at a 45-degree angle, where it will create a shadow on the chin, but it won't make her eyes turn into just, black raccoon eyes. Coming down here and looking at her hands, they are pretty evenly lit, especially when you compare them to her face. The tones are quite similar. So we want to make sure that our light doesn't just fall only on her face or only on her hands, because we want a similar exposure between the two. I think the look of the light on her hands supports the idea that it might be a 45-degree angle for where the lamp is placed, because we get a shadow underneath, but the whole top of her arms and hands is very much evenly lit. And we do want to make sure that the flower here gets light on it. And has that specific brightness. Now, you would need a flower that is bright enough to achieve that, so it doesn't blend into the tone of the cover on the furniture. Okay, so now I'm going to start building. So if this was an actual room, obviously you'd have to figure out the spacing and the production design in this way, but I'm going to build this as if it was a studio. We have a set wall right here. We have flooring that we can control, which is that tanner tone right there. And yeah, we have painted the wall this kind of reddish rust gray. We have our pink settee couch. We have our model sitting for us. So now let's talk about putting those lights. Like I said, we can do this with a front lighting top down at a 45-degree angle, but we also do need something for that background. Now, I put the wall right here. That would be probably, 10 feet behind her. Now, depending on your lens choice, that wall might need to be further back or closer, depending on what you have, if you're on a set where you can move this. Otherwise, you might be moving the couch and the model forwards and back, or changing your lens. In the case of the painting itself, the perspective is a little bit hard to actually tell, but I do think that there is some kind of optical compression between these things. So I'm going to put the wall back here just a little bit further, and that way we can start lighting by lighting that wall as evenly as we possibly can, because we want the entire spread behind her to have light on it without having kind of a vignette in the corners. There's no vignette, there's no fall off, it's very even. I'm going to start by going like this and coming from the side. Now obviously the light path wouldn't travel through the wall, but where it would stop right behind her, if our field of view is kind of from right here to right here, all of that would be lit. So what kind of light setup would I necessarily be using for that? I think that you could easily use a relatively large piece of diffusion. I would shoot for a 6x6 if I could. If you could only get away with something smaller, definitely could make it work with like a 4x4. So that's what we have right there, lighting the back wall. Now, I don't really mind that it might be casting onto the couch just a little bit, because we don't even see that behind her. We do see the floor, and so we want to make sure that the floor is being lit pretty evenly as well. And from where the light path would be, I think it would be. But from here, if you have a big piece of diffusion, it probably is going to cast on her. So I'm going to say we need to use a 4x4, a floppy, or a wag flag, something of the sort, to block off the side right here, so that we don't end up having the light falling on our subject as well. We want that top light to be the primary source. Now, this could also be a good way to make sure that we do retain that little bit of shape on the side of the face, where it is black, where it is having a little bit of that shadow coming in. We could actually kind of sandwich her between two of these large black flags, just to pull a little bit of the light out of the sides of the face and out of the sides of those cheekbones, while also blocking that diffused light from landing on her as well. So something important to note though, is that that shadow is kind of filled out. It is light. It's not an incredibly high contrast shadow. So we might be looking at more of a diffused light. even though it is relatively hard, but the whole image has a soft quality to it. So if we want to go on kind of a middle route and have a softbox that is not a incredibly soft, incredibly large softbox, but just soft enough to give a kind of elegance to the light while also still having those shadows, I think that would be a good option. So I'm just gonna say softbox, and we're gonna bring that in. And we don't have 3 dimensions here, as you probably have noticed. So this is going to be at a 45-degree angle, top down. You probably could mount this to an overhead light bar, to a grid, especially if you're in a studio, or you could use a tall light stand because you want to avoid getting it in the camera shot. So you'll have to play with that a little bit. But I'm gonna put the camera back here a little bit so that way we can say that this might be a 50mm lens or so, something to give a little bit of compression. It could probably be towards a 70, but you know, we want something that has a little bit of compression to it. It's not wide, it's in that normal to low telephoto range. And I think that having the camera in this position would give us that type of look. So we have that softbox casting down on her. So then we do have the idea that we need light falling on this part of the couch as well, and that shadow is not fully filled in via contrast. So we're gonna take an octabox or a space light and put that just next to it, so that way we make sure that we get enough exposure on the couch and to fill that shadow in just a little bit by creating that omnidirectional soft light. There's no shape to it, and that will make sure that we have enough exposure as we adjust it, but also not overpower the shaping of the softbox in terms of both softness, but not being too soft to not create the shadow look. The combination of those two should give you enough exposure on her overall. And then the background, once again, is going to be entirely lit by that diffusion sheet. So that is the way I would do this in terms of a more professional setup. Now, if you want to create this for even less money, let's talk about that. This is our first kind of ideal, fully professional type setup. Now, let's say we don't have a giant 4x4 or 6x6 diffusion because those are several $100s. So let's get rid of that. You might need to start playing around. You could just do the lamp itself with like a hood on it and try to get that circle all the way around. You might have some fall off, but it is possible. If you can't do it this way, what you could be doing is getting something like an octabox, something that is still... Oh, wait a minute. Whoops. I did select the wrong one. I put an octabox there, but I meant a lantern or a space light. So here, we are having the option to do something like have an octabox right here. That will still get you a really large source of soft light. It might not be as large, so you might have to get that closer in and adjust, but that can work. If you don't have WAG flags, you don't need them. You do need something on this side to make sure you block that light, but it can be a curtain, it can be poster board, it can be, something, it can be a piece of plywood if you have it and have somebody hold it, but you do need something to block the light on that side to make sure it doesn't cast onto her. Now, at the same time, an octabox does have some shaping quality where it pushes the light out the front, so you could move this forward enough so that the light does come straight out of the octabox and not cast onto her. Then you could still have the lantern and the softbox over here and your camera placement there. That does save you a little bit of money because you don't need the diffusion and you don't need the WAG flag and you don't need the floppy. It will change your ability and the flexibility of the setup just a little bit, but I think that it's still possible with something just like this. If you really do not have a lantern, you probably can get away without it. Your image just might be darker, or you might need to turn up your ISO a little bit more, but there are flexible ways. I would say this is kind of the ideal low budget method, and I would say that this is a more flexible, more professionally standardized method to get the image, fine-tuned to exactly what you need. But either of these setups could reasonably recreate this image. We have a lower budget version right here where you might not even need the lantern. if you don't have one on hand or if you can't afford to add that to your rental, I think that you could get away without it. You might just have to fine tune your ISO a little bit more or such. Go a little bit wider with your aperture. There are ways to make it still work if you don't have that lantern, but this is, I think, a reasonable solution for a lower budget method. If you do have something that you can use as a flag on the sides to try to pull those shadows down just a little bit, I think that would be best, but it's not needed if you don't have that as an option. Over here, we have much more control because we do have the two wag flags pulling those shadows down just a little bit. We have the large 4x4 or 6x6 diffusion frame to create just a really soft, even background. We have the lantern to create a nice space light and make sure that we have enough exposure while also just lightening the contrast in that shadow just a little bit. And we have that softbox top down 45 degrees at the front of the subject to make sure that we have that really unique stark shaping on the face. So that pretty much wraps up this lighting diagram video, everybody. Thank you for watching. If you like lighting diagram videos and cinematography theory type videos, please consider subscribing. I'm really pushing to get 200 subscribers right now. If you want to support these videos, you can find my link to my Patreon down in the video's description. I also have a Ko-fi tip page. You can follow me on social media. I am really active on Mastodon now, so my username is @Trenton_Hoshiko, like it is in pretty much every place. I have a Blue Sky. That one is Trenton Hoshiko. I have a Twitter, Trenton_Hoshiko, and Filmmaking Tumblr, and a cinematography Pinterest. I have lots of social media and lots of places that I hang out besides YouTube. You can find all of those links in the video's description down below. If you are curious about getting any of the tools that I've talked about here, I have affiliate links in the video's description down below that help support the channel at no extra cost to you if you're curious about picking any of these tools up for yourself. Thank you for watching and have a great day.